Good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar tonight, What, Why, How. We hope that you find this very beneficial, and we want to thank you for joining us and taking your time to join this webinar. We have lots of folks on the webinar tonight from just a little bit all over, all the states, and we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So just to let you know, in the right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little area there that says questions. So you're going to be using that box a lot tonight to type in questions or type in communications, because Beth, our presenter, is going to be asking you questions and asking you to kind of share some of your thoughts as she works through the presentation. After the webinar is over, you have my email because you've gotten it or your confirmation to sign up for this, but we'll also can send you Beth Smith's email if you have any questions afterwards. There's 3 handouts there. Don't worry if you didn't get them downloaded. They are on our website, and when the webinar is over, you can go there and download those handouts. With that said, Beth Smith's our trainer tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're having had a nice day and are having a nice evening. Thanks again for joining us. As Sherry said, this is going to be a very interactive webinar, and my goal for you is that you will walk away from this with a good understanding of the difference between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question, and you'll be able to put that into practice starting tomorrow with your children. We're actually going to do a little test right now to test out how that question box works, and I'm going to ask you a question, and the question I'm going to ask you is a very simple one, which is, what is your name? So type in that question box your name. Answer that question. What is your name? Sherry will read off as many as she can, but she probably won't be able to read them all.
Okay, so my name is Amy, Laura, Angela, Jody, LaShawn Dawson, Cindy, Belinda, Singleton, Pam Fields, Jan, Letitia, Jeannie, Kathy, Becky, Mary, Galen, Debbie, and Miss Kathy Bell, and a
And it
lot.
goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to ask you another question. This one's not quite as easy or as quick to answer. And the question is, why did you choose to join this webinar this evening?
Okay, we're still getting names, so I'll let you take just a minute so you can answer that question. Okay, here we go. I want to incorporate more open-ended questions into my lesson plans. I love
Great.
to learn new ideas, to learn how to ask open-ended questions to my students better than I do now. I would like to learn more about open-ended questions for STAR visits,
Ah, excellent. Okay.
to help with training teachers, to
Hmm.
help with questioning. I want to know how to ask these questions easily, to better understand how to implement open-ended questions, to learn better ways to ask better open-ended questions during story time, maintain professional development hours, to provide intense technical assistance when providing TA preparing for their ECHRs. We got lots of
Excellent.
responses.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, Sherry, I'm going to stop you there because this
Okay.
we could go on all night with these 2 questions, but there was a method to my madness there. As you will notice, those were 2 questions that I asked you. One was a very simple one-word answer. What is your name? And you all typed your name. The other one was an open-ended question, which started with a why. And as you will notice, there were similarities in your answers, but they were not exactly the same. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We're going to focus on those open-ended questions that take more than a one-word response, and the answer is probably going to vary from child to child. So thanks for participating in that little experiment, and we're going to get rolling. So let me move here. So here's a little test to start you out. So which ones of these questions here that I have listed do you feel like would best begin a back and forth conversation? And I noticed that one of the answers we just had from someone about why they joined the webinar had to do with technical assistance regarding training on this topic and ECHRS or the environmental rating scale. So that could be your FICRS, it could also be class. And one of the things that they are looking for when they do those evaluations is conversations with children that go deep beyond one word answers. So I'm going to read these questions to you, and I want you to think about this as we go through here. Which ones of these do you believe are open-ended questions and would prompt those back and forth conversations? And you can just type the numbers for those in the question box. So, number 1, what color is the grass? Number 2, who do you know that likes to eat pizza? Number 3, what do you think is going to happen when you add that block to the top of the stack? Number 4, what did you eat for dinner last night? Number 5, why do you think ice melts when you put it in the sun? Number 6, what is the name of your dog? Number 7, where is your coat? And number 8, why do you think people do not live on the moon? I will give you a hint. There are 3 questions in this list that are open-ended questions that would really encourage a back and forth conversation. Please put the numbers of the 3 that you think are open-ended questions in the question box. Let's see how much you already know about open-ended questions, probably more than you realize.
We're getting some fantastic responses, and I can tell you overwhelmingly, we've got 3, 5, and 8.
You see, you do know more than you thought you knew. Exactly. And if you look at those questions, you will notice they begin with what and why, and we're going to add how in there, but there's not one with how right now. Those are questions that there's not going to be a one-word response to, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. For instance, why do you think people do not live on the moon? We as adults know why people do not live on the moon, but children don't have all that background knowledge necessarily, especially young children. So their answers might be all over the place. It might be something like, well, we can't drive our car there, or it might take too long to get there, or there's no McDonald's there. Who knows what they might say? So the answers will be all over the place. But the point is not the answer. The point is that you're getting them to think and you're engaging them in conversations. So when they say, well, why do you think people do not live on the moon? They say, because there's no McDonald's there. You can continue that conversation and say, oh, well, why would that be a problem if there was no McDonald's? And take them down that path of building that conversation back and forth where they share their ideas, where they share their thoughts. Great job. All right, let's keep moving. So, open-ended questions are so powerful because they have many acceptable answers, like we just talked about. And a lot of them have no known answer. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong. And while, like the moon question, we may know the science as adults why people don't live there. I will be the first to admit that I don't know all the science. So a lot of times there's no known answer to an open-ended question. They emphasize the thinking process and not the answer. And that's what I really want to get at here. They open that door for the conversation to keep going beyond, where is your coat? Well, it's in my cubby. End of conversation. Unless, of course, it's lost, and then that could open up a whole bunch of conversation. And they require higher cognitive skills and reasoning and judgment. So it's not something as simple as what's the color of the block you're holding in your hand. It could be like the question about what do you think is going to happen when you put that block on the stack. The child has to reason, the child has to think, the child has to predict, and those are all higher cognitive skills. Okay? Oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. All right, so Bloom's taxonomy has been around a very long time, and I like how it ties in with questioning and asking open-ended questions. Because when you talk about Bloom's taxonomy, what you're really talking about is taking things from simplistic down at the bottom, which is remembering, recalling information, for instance, the color of a crayon, to creating and constructing new ideas. For instance, What are you planning to do with that cardboard box? They're creating with it. They're going to take it in many different directions. So as you look at Bloom's taxonomy, there's different levels, and the things that you see down here at the very bottom are the simplistic answers, recalling information such as I just said, the colors or shapes or numbers or their name or their brother or sister's name or their pet's name, something very simple, right? Understanding is explaining the ideas and the concepts, the things that they understand, like for instance, that blue and yellow mixed together to make green. Applying use information in a new way. So something they already know about, let's say they already know that green and or that yellow and blue mix to make green when they paint, they could apply that information then to when they're mixing Play-Doh. Okay, so they're applying what they already know. When they analyze, they compare and they contrast, they experiment. I'm sure you do a lot of that. So the key is there with the open-ended questions to keep that experimenting and that comparing and contrasting going. Evaluating and supporting their decisions. Why did you choose to put that particular block at the top of the stack? Getting them to explain to you their thinking, and then again creating, which is constructing new. So as you go up this pyramid, obviously you're challenging them to think more and more and more. Now, let's say you work with toddlers and twos who are not yet verbal, right? They're obviously not going to be able to verbalize up here or even at that point do this. They're not developmentally ready for that yet. So you have to meet your children where they are, and it's okay to try to move up the stack and see what happens. Let's say you're working with a 3-year-old and you are asking them to compare and contrast maybe their sorting blocks and their, well, how are these blocks like those blocks? And they just can't quite verbalize that yet. And that's okay. Um, they may be able to sort them, but they might not be able to verbalize how they're alike, how they're different. That comes with development, it comes with time. So it's just that you're aware of the process of asking questions that challenge the children when they're developmentally ready to move up that stack. Okay. I keep hitting this wrong button. I'm like, sorry about that, guys. All right. So again, why are they so powerful? Well, they think at a higher level, again, moving up the pyramid. You're also doing an amazing job when you get these children engaged in these conversations using open-ended questions of building language in a meaningful way. So let's say you ask that question about the moon. That could spur a whole lot of new vocabulary and a whole lot of new language just because of that one open-ended question. And importantly, what we were talking about earlier with the environmental rating scales and things like class and Fickers, that they are increasing those child and teacher interactions in a meaningful way. So you're engaging with the child, you're asking those questions that are promoting thinking, you're going back and forth, and that's what they're looking for. They invite the children to share their ideas and opinions. They help them also talk about how they feel, and they also help you evaluate as you're planning what they already know, what they want to know, and then they can even help you figure out, okay, well, where can we find that information? So these open-ended questions are a gateway to all of these things. So that is one of the some more reasons why they are so very, very powerful. Okay. I just cannot seem to hit this right button here. All right, so tips for questioning. Incorporate them into your daily activities. Remember, it takes time and it takes thought. We are so trained sometimes to ask those simple one-word questions, um, you know, that we forget the power behind the open-ended ones. But you have to be interested. Children know when you're not really interested, and so if you're just asking the questions to ask the questions, that's not going to work. You have to ask the questions and be truly listening and engaged in what they have to say. Um, when you ask the right type of open-ended question, it encourages them to cooperate with each other and not compete with one another. And that's important too. And make sure that they're truly open. In other words, you're open to any response. Um, that you don't have a right answer in the back of your mind about what you want them to say. And this one, the last one, is the hardest one to remember, is to wait. Ask the question and then wait. Wait for them to think. Wait for them to formulate a response. Especially important for children who are working on language skills, your ELL, DLL children. Give them time to think about their response and then verbalize it. And that's sometimes really, really hard. We want to jump right in and we want to say something in response. And it's sometimes hard. It is hard to sit back and wait. But that probably is what the most important bullet on the slide is, to take the time to wait. Does that make sense? All right. So asking questions during free play. This is a wonderful time to ask the open-ended questions because children are engaged in things that are interesting to them, enjoyable for them. It's also a huge benefit for children who are ELL, DLL, and those with language delays because it enables you to expose them to more language and more vocabulary in a meaningful way. Here are some examples of how you can do that. Encourage them to make predictions, like the example of the stack of blocks, right? To stretch their thinking. What do you think is going to happen when? That kind of ties in with cause and effect, right? So you ask them what do they think is going to happen when they make their predictions, and then you can compare that to their predictions and then come back with a why question. Well, why do you think that happened? And what would happen if you did it differently? Um, Engage them in comparing and contrasting, even at mealtime, right? How are the mashed potatoes like the peas and carrots? Or how is the chicken like the let's say that you had a hamburger the day before. Which do you like better? Why do you like it better? That's the why. Which do you like better is the closed question, but the why do you like it better is the open-ended one. Promote problem solving. You want to move those blocks from this side of the room to the other side of the room, but you don't have anything to carry them in. What are you going to do? How are you going to figure that out? And challenge them to evaluate and assess how well did it work? Could it have worked better in a different way? What do you think? Are there other ways you want to try? And invite them to create new things. I mean, set up your room and set up your areas and put out materials that invite children to create, because when they create, they're thinking on their own. And one of the most important things I learned in college when I was taking my class about art and the create and arts in general was, never ask a child what are they making. Instead, just making an open-ended tell me about what you're making, or tell me about how you're using those art materials. Keep it open so that they get that conversation going. Plus, they think you already know what they're making, but obviously lots of times that's not that obvious. All right. Okay, computer. Sorry about this. I don't know what's going on. Whoops, now I went too far. All right. Now I'm going too far the other way. I am so sorry. My computer is having a glitch today. All right, so can you spot the three open-ended questions? We're going to do another little test because I've talked for quite a while now. So, number one, why do you think the Play-Doh feels squishy? Number two, what happens when you press the rolling pin on the Play-Doh? Number three, do you like Play-Doh? Number four, what color is the Play-Doh? And number five, how could you flatten the dough if you did not have a rolling pin? And I think there might be more than three. Let's see how you do.
Okay. I am getting 1, 2, and 5, or 1 and 5, or 1, 2, and 5. Mm, yeah, that's,
1, 2, and
well,
5.
someone did say 4, but I'm not sure about that one. But yeah, 1, 2, 5.
1, 2, 5. You guys are doing a great job. Yes. 1, 2, and 5 are your open-ended questions. Again, starts with why. Why do you think the Play-Doh feels squishy? Is there going to be a right or a wrong answer to that? No. The child is going to have, or children, if you ask that of 10 children, you might end up with 10 completely different answers. What happens when you press the dough on the Play-Doh? Well, again, there's not going to be it's not going to be said the same way. They may all get to the gist of it gets flatter, but they might say it in a totally different way. And then how could you flatten the dough if you did not have a rolling pin? Well, who knows what they're going to come up with there. Again, that's up to the top of Bloom's taxonomy because they're going to create. They may come up with an entirely different way of flattening the Play-Doh that you never even thought of. And so those are questions that, again, challenge children to think, open up the door for conversations, because let's say you ask the question about how could you flatten the dough if you do not have a rolling pin, and the child comes up with an answer, and before they go get whatever it is they're going to try, then you can ask another open-ended question. What do you think is going to happen when you use whatever they've chosen as a rolling pin? And then you can encourage them to, after they've done it, compare their results to their predictions of what they thought was going to happen. And then if it turned out well, they might continue to flatten the dough that way. Or if it didn't turn out well, then you can challenge them to think of other ways, or other tools that you want to try that can to flatten the Play-Doh. So again, it's opening up that door for a conversation that goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And as long as you're asking the open-ended questions, you're going to have a lot of the back and forth. Does that mean you never ask a closed-ended question like, what color is the Play-Doh? Absolutely not. If you are evaluating, or you need to evaluate a child's understanding of colors, instead of pulling them aside and having them name all the crayons in a box, this is the perfect meaningful time to do that. So as you're engaging in that conversation, you can throw it in there if you need to evaluate if they know what the color, in this case, yellow is. It doesn't mean you're never going to ask those questions. It just means that when you want to engage children, you want them to think, you want them to predict, you want them to create, you want to stick with those open-ended questions. Does that make sense?
Beth,
All right. Yes,
I just want to share that one person shared that the question, "Do you like Play-Doh?" to change it to "Why do you like Play-Doh?" to make it
exactly.
open-ended. So,
Exactly.
question.
That is exactly right. Many of the closed questions can be twisted around and made into an open-ended question. That was a great point. All right, so now you get to practice. All right, so we talked a lot about open-ended questions. We talked about how they begin with words like what and why and how. Here we have two little girls looking to be at a vegetable garden, obviously, and they have their magnifiers. They look very intent. What open-ended questions could you ask as you engage with these children at the vegetable garden? So assume that you are visiting a vegetable garden, or maybe you have one at your program and you're outside and you're incorporating a lot of different areas of development. What open-ended questions could you ask? So you type them in the question box. Sherry will unmute herself, and we'll read a fair number of them. I don't know that we'll get all of them read, but we will read as many as we can, because I want to have some opportunities for you to keep practicing.
Take your time. I'm sure that takes a little bit longer to type those questions out.
Absolutely.
Okay. Everybody must be really thinking hard. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. That was my fault. What do you think the girls are doing in this picture? So if you're sharing it with your providers, why do you have the magnifying glass? Um, how do you think they care for the garden?
Good question.
What do you see and what are you thinking? What are you doing with your magnifying glass? Um, what kind of vegetables do you see? What is in your garden? Why do you think some of the leaves are short and some are tall? That's a good question.
Good question.
How do you think the vegetables grow? What do you
Another.
think makes them grow? Um, what kind of, let's see, what do you think is growing in this garden? How do you use the magnifying glass correctly? Um, why is the cabbage green?
That's a
How do you
good
think,
question.
how do you think the plants grow? Tell me about what you see. How does it look? Can you describe what you are doing? What are you looking for? Why are you looking for it? Um, what are ways you can care for the plants? Very good question. Why do the vegetables grow the way they do? What would
That's
you grow if you had a garden? Why do you think the plants need to grow? Why is there a shovel in the dirt and what would you do with it? That's a great question.
I didn't even notice that shovel, but very good observation skills.
um, what do you think they use these plants for?
Ah,
Um, let's see. What are the differences in the plants?
that's a great question.
How do you think the grass feels? What can you do to help the plants to grow?
Good
What do you
question.
think is needed for these vegetables to grow tall? Um, why did the magnifying glass make the images bigger? What do you see in the dirt? Um, start any question with I wonder.
Mm, mm-hmm.
I wonder what kind of bugs might be in the dirt. How do we get these vegetables to our refrigerator at home? That's a good one. Why is the dirt around the plants? These are great.
Excellent. Excellent. You guys are doing a great job. I heard
And I
lots of
didn't bring them
whys.
all, but I just tried to,
We'd
to
be
keep
we
going.
would be here all night.
Yeah, but good responses.
Yes. So here's that is you guys did an excellent job. I heard a lot of questions that begin with what and why and how, questions that then would extend beyond the obviously a one word answer, but also would open up the door to taking this experience and extending upon it. So, for instance, someone said, how do you think the vegetables get from the garden to the grocery store? Well, that then leads to, exploring transportation and exactly how that process happens. You could even use technology to help children find the answer to that. So, great, great job. All right, so let's see if I can get my cursor to come back here. All right, so here were a couple I came up with. How does the magnifier help you learn about the plants? How could you use the magnifier in other ways? What do you think would happen if those plants did not have enough water? Why do you think that? That's a great question to ask anytime for almost anything. Why do you think that? Um, what vegetables could you grow in a garden? Why did you choose those vegetables? So you're going to notice that is a closed question. What vegetables would you grow if you had a garden? Because they're going to answer you maybe not with one word, but with very specific answers: carrots, broccoli, corn, whatever. But the follow-up to that is an open-ended question. Why did you choose those vegetables? Okay. And then somebody actually said that. How do you think fresh vegetables get from the fields to the grocery stores? So again, focusing on those questions that the child cannot simply answer in one word. But if you do want to ask a question like this that is more closed, you can follow it up immediately then once they've responded with an open-ended question, and that keeps the conversation going. All right, great. We're going to do it again. So now we have children blowing bubbles, which I think all children love bubbles. So we have one child blowing the bubbles, and it looks like we have two children trying to catch the bubbles. So what open-ended questions could you ask as you're engaging with children as they play outside with bubbles?
Sorry, I gotta mute myself. Why do bubbles float? If you could go inside a bubble, where would you go? I like that one.
Ooh.
What do you think makes the bubbles float? What makes the bubbles? What does it feel like when the bubble pops?
Mm.
Why do the bubbles go up? What do you think the bubbles are made of? How do you think bubbles are made? How are the bubbles created? How far do you think the bubbles can go? Um, how, why do you think the bubbles are circles? That's a good one. Why, what do you think will happen to the bubble? Um, how do the bubbles flow? I'm trying not to repeat because there's so many good questions. How high? Um, why is there a stream moving around the bubbles?
Oh,
Why did the bubbles change direction? How do you think the bubbles are round and why do the bubbles go up? Why are some bubbles small and some are big?
that's a great question.
Yeah. Why do you think bubbles pop when they touch something?
Mm. That's
I
another
wonder,
great question.
yeah.
We need a physicist involved with this activity.
Why do bubbles have rainbows? I love that one.
Hmm.
Um, how many colors do you see in the bubbles? What colors do you see in the bubbles and why do you think they change?
I like
Where
that.
did
The
the
closed, and then it was a closed question, but then it turned into an open question. Great job.
where, all right, those are great. Good.
Awesome. Well, you guys are really doing an awesome job, and I do believe we are going to need either a chemist or a physicist with us for some of these. But actually, that is a perfect example of when you can extend upon a child's interest in something. So let's say you ask the question about, well, why do the bubbles have rainbows? I personally do not know the answer to that. It has probably something to do with the soap and the light and the refraction or reflection or who knows what, but I would have to be using the internet to help me find the answer to that question. And that is a perfect example of how you can show children how technology can be a source of information and not just entertainment. In today's world, we are so blessed that we have Google or Bing or whatever you want to use to be able to find an answer to the question like that about bubbles and rainbows. Before the internet, we would have to go to the library and look it up, right? But because we have the internet, we can find an answer to that question fairly quickly. So that then lets you expand upon the answer or helps you tie in finding an answer to a question like that, which may lead to more questions. And that's the goal, right? Because you just want to keep this process going. So great job. Here were a couple I came up with. How do the bubbles feel when you pop them? Someone brought that up. Adding in the feel is always great with an open-ended question because that's very personal. How does it feel? It's going to feel different to me, maybe than it would to Sherry. What happens when you touch the bubbles? That may be different as well. Like if you touch them when your hands are wet versus when your hands are dry, is it the same? Is it different? Why do you think the bubbles pop when they hit something? Somebody came up with that one too. What would happen if you could blow a bubble as big as your whole body? Someone had something like that as well. What other items could you use to blow bubbles, which then would lead to the children experimenting and trying new things and coming up with their own bubble blowers, building them, creating them? And someone came up with this one. What do you think it'd be like to float around inside the air in a bubble? That's a great question because the children really will think creatively and use their imaginations. And if you're working with children who are on the older, more advanced side, who are beginning maybe to uh, who are drawing and maybe even beginning to dictate and or if their school agers write, then they can write or draw or dictate stories about like what would happen if they were inside a giant bubble. So you can really expand upon, again, this one activity, which is a simple blowing bubbles in the backyard, that then becomes an entire experience of activity, a slew of activities actually, in many different areas, from science to language to math, because you can talk about how bubbles are spheres, and that's a three-dimensional shape. Size, counting how many bubbles they can pop, and then well, how could you pop more than those? So again, the whole idea here is that these open-ended questions that you're asking will then open the door for you to take experiences, build upon them, encourage the children to think, and really take a simple activity and make it into much more. So great job. Okay, so one of the most important things that I've talked about and we'll talk about it some more are increasing your adult-child interactions. So I'm going to ask a closed-ended question right now because this is a question that it can only be answered in a closed fashion. Will you share with us which environmental rating scale is used in your program? Is it class? Is it the Fickers or Eckers? Which one do you use in your program? And just type the answer in the question box so we can get some idea of the different environmental rating skills that are being used.
Okay, we've got Eckers class. We don't use one. I'm a coach to programming using Eckers. Most Eckers, yeah. Pickers, Itters. Not funny. They're starting to
I know.
sound.
There's Itters, Eckers, and Fickers. It's very
Yeah,
confusing.
that's pretty much. And then one person that said we don't use one.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that they really look for again are these adult-child interactions. So by asking the open-ended questions, you should be able to increase your scores in those areas where they're looking for that. And again, not only does that apply just to the adult-child interactions, but then it spills over, as I was mentioning earlier, into building upon the children's interests and so many different other areas. So as you're using the open-ended questions more and more, you should see that this is really helping you out with your environmental rating scale. All right, so here's the biggest thing is I know from talking to a lot of you out there, especially those of you who are family child care providers and have, just you and the children, and you wear many, many hats, that it's not always easy sometimes to think about a lot of this because your day is so crazy, right? So one of the things that you can do when you are planning your experiences is plan your questions, okay? So think about when you're planning an activity, the kinds of open-ended questions and in some cases closed questions. You need a mix in there of both um, that you can ask when you're doing the experience. So this is an example of an activity from one of our units that we've done called Now It's Dry. And I believe this whole unit was about wet opposites like wet and dry and in and out and up and down, and I don't even remember. But anyway, in this experience, the children are experimenting with water and paper towels and plastic blocks. And so as part of this, in the box you see questions to spur thinking. So, for instance, the first one, do any of your families use wind to help dry clothing? That's a closed question, right? There's a set answer to that. But the next one, how do you think wind makes drying things faster, is a very open-ended question. And next one, when you go swimming, why do you think you dry faster on a windy, sunny day than a cloudy, damp day? So again, when you are working on planning your activities with the children, think also as you're doing so about the open-ended questions that you can plan to go along with that. And then if they're there, and you're with the children and you're reading through your lesson or what you're going to do, even if you have one or two questions that are open-ended that you plan to ask, you won't forget. And because believe me, in in my world right now, if I don't write things down, I will forget them. So my reminders on my phone has become a godsend, and then I still have notes, and when I go to the grocery store I make a list, because if I don't, I will walk out of there with the one thing that I went there to get. It happens all the time. So this is similar to that, right? This is so important that when you're doing your activity plans, think about planning your questions as well. Because that way, even if you have one or two, you at least have something to get the conversation started. All right. Okay. All right. Great. All right. So they work, guess what, with parents and guardians too. So open-ended questions are very important as you try to engage families and you try to involve families, you try to learn about your families. So when you're having interactions with them, whether it be a formal interaction, such as when you're intaking for a new family into your program, or maybe you're having a parent-teacher conference or um, a guardian parent guardian conference, or maybe it's during drop-off pickup. This first one, for instance, what was the best part of your child's weekend and why was that the best? That is going to tell you a lot going into Monday. All right. What should I know about your child that will help me plan activities for him or her? How can I better support your child as he or she learns to use the potty, give up the passy, um, self-soothe, whatever it is? Okay. What activities does your child seem to enjoy at home the most, and why do you think those are his or her favorite? And how does your child react to new situations normally? So questions like these can give you keen insight into a child that you would not have if you hadn't asked the question. And they also show your interest in the child and your recognition that the parent or guardian knows their child extremely well, and the insight that they give you into that child is going to not just help you, but it's really going to help that child, right? For instance, how does your child normally react to new situations? We know that all children are different in that respect. Some children adapt very easily. Some children, it just naturally takes them a lot longer to adapt. And the parent can really help you to gain insight as there are new situations all the time. So those kind of questions can really help you gain insight. All right. Anybody, let's share a little bit more. How about you share a question that you like to ask your parents or guardians to help you learn about their children so that you know more about them as you're planning experiences and engaging them in your program. So give me a suggestion, one or two questions that you like to ask parents or guardians. It could be on intake, it could be at a conference, it could be just day to day, pick up, drop off, whenever. Just questions that you like to ask parents and guardians so that everybody else can hear the ones you ask. Because this is how we all learn. We learn by sharing. So I love to do the interaction because I think it's great hearing all the answers.
Um, Beth and I did a whole workshop a couple of years ago on communication. And the way you ask questions is always with a smile on your face. It's amazing the difference in the attitude that parents or even children take with just the way you deliver the question. Okay, all right, so here we go. Now we're getting some stuff. What helps comfort your child? Good question.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to assist you in your child's learning experience? How does your kiddo react to other children when the other child is sad or crying? I like that one.
Oh, yes,
That's
yes.
so, children needs to learn about empathy. What are your child's favorite foods? Tell me about ways we can help you feel part of our school family. Oh, I love that one. How does your child learn best? Mom, Dad, write a letter introducing your child to the classroom. How does your child like to get ready for rest? When potty, what words do you use?
Ah.
Is your child having any type of allergies? What is your child most like center during play? How does your child react to others when they disagree? That's really good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, That's it for that right now. But those are
Okay.
good.
They're good, and things like the, what center
Oh,
activities do they Oh,
so
go ahead,
one more,
Sherry.
Beth. What makes your child laugh? I love that one.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a definitely good one. I was gonna say the question about what center they like best. That's a great question. It's more of a closed question because it gives you some insight into what they like. But follow that up with why do you think they like that best? Because that's going to give you even more insight. So, for instance, maybe the child says, the parent says, well, they really like puzzles. Well, why do you think they like puzzles? And the parent may come back and say, well, I think they really like the puzzles because they like, manipulating the pieces. Well, that tells you something, right? It helps you gain information. So as you ask those questions about favorites or things that work or, how do they get ready for a nap? What do they do? Like, maybe the parent will say, well, they like to read books. Well, why do you think that really helps? And see what they say. They may not even know, but they might have some idea. So great job. All right. So now, what are your questions? We've gone through a lot about open-ended questions, closed questions, why they're important, when you should use them. But now's your chance to ask me whatever questions you might have before we get out of the PowerPoint and we're actually going to go into our website so I can show you where some of these resources are. So before we do that, I want to answer any and all of your questions related to open-ended questions.
A couple more that came in after we closed it. Is your child playful with others? I like that question. And how can I make your child feel more comfortable? That was around the questions you asked parents, but I was just waiting for the others. Um, don't have any questions for you yet, Beth. We might have some in a minute.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think is the most challenging part about asking open-ended questions?
There is one question. How many service hours ID this session? Um,
Are you in if you're in Pennsylvania, um, I think this is a 1.5 hours. I don't know if we'll make it to the full 1.5, but you have to be in the PD registry from that. If you're not in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure.
I just looked it up. You're in Florida, and our certificate, it's not so much the hours, it's just that you can show that you came to the training sessions, which a lot of the coalition CCR&R folks look for that certificate to see that you've attended some of the training. Okay. Okay, so making sure it's easy for the child to understand. I'm not,
Yes, that was my answer to my question about why it's so challenging. And
yeah.
that is true. You have to make sure the question you ask them is developmentally appropriate for them. Obviously, you're not going to ask them some question that is way beyond them. You have to keep it at a level that they understand. And that is true. That can be challenging.
When children don't respond the way you think they will, what do you do?
And sometimes they say stuff that you're like, uh-oh.
Asking a question quickly enough before the child moves on. That's that's
Very
challenging.
true. Very true. Children, they are so fast and their interests change rapidly from one thing to the next. So that is very true. But sometimes, hopefully by asking the open-ended question, it sparks interest that then keeps them on that task that they started.
Answering before they have time to answer. Going back to wait. I
Wait.
think that is true even with your friends. I mean, it's just not working with children, it's working with your spouse. Sometimes teachers' personalities are quiet and reserved. So that's a struggle, I guess. Um, Never saying the child is incorrect, but giving the correct answer in a creative way. Let's see,
That
make
can be
sure I've got
tricky.
all the answers to that. Yeah. Um, Waiting for the correct answer to an open-ended question, because that takes a while for the child to come up with that. The challenge is allowing for growth mindset and deliberate changing your changing your behavior when it comes to questioning. Yeah, you have to be very conscious of it.
Yeah, you do. And that's why I said when you're planning experiences, plan the questions, at least one or two that you plan to ask during that activity. And that will help you, if nothing else, even if you just ask one, it will become more of a habit over time and you will naturally just ask those questions. And then when the children are engaged in free play, that's an excellent time to formulate them in your head while you watch and observe and then ask the question.
Being able to ask questions that are able to answer to their ability.
Hmm.
That's a good one. Give the children a lot of opportunities to respond with a lot of answers. How many times do you try to ask if the child has trouble answering? That's a good question.
And that is a challenge when you're talking about your nonverbals, obviously, and your children who are just learning language. Um, Sometimes you kind of have to fill in the holes. They may give you some answer, and then you have to elaborate upon that answer. And they can indicate not in a nonverbal fashion if you got it right or if you didn't. It can be really tough, and there are other children that are just having issues with language and maybe have a language delay. So the beauty of, for instance, those of you in family childcare is that a lot of times you have a mixed age group. And so these open-ended questions are ones that your more advanced children and your older children are going to take and run with. Well, those that are nonverbal or less verbal will learn by listening to them, right? So even infants are sponges in terms of language. They're constantly absorbing everything they hear. And so I don't think you want to badger a child ever, right? You put the question out there and you wait and you wait. And you might get maybe just a, two words, right, that you have to then extrapolate upon. But the goal is just to ask the question, and your nonverbal children might demonstrate the answer in a way that's through actions versus words. Um,
One response is the answer may not be what you expect, and that's okay. That may be
exactly,
the
exactly, exactly.
And another point, another issue is how to ask a question that is interesting to the child. It's like being on their level.
Right, right. Think like a 4-year-old, think like a 3-year-old, right? And that can be challenging sometimes. It really can be. Um, the why question's a great one because it's just so out there. Like, why do you think that is? Or why is that your favorite? Or, you know, why do you like that one best? Those kind of questions are appropriate for a lot of children because you're talking about them. Like, why is that your favorite? And they should know why it's their favorite, you know. So thinking about it from their point of view in terms of keeping it personal, that's why the feelings questions are good too. Like, you know, the ones that say, how did it feel? Or how does it feel? Or how are you going to feel? Or how do you think it will feel? Those kind of things.
Another challenge, I think this is a good one. There's a couple here. Allowing the child to lead, which
Yes.
is hard. Including the parents to keep the conversation going at home so that they know what's going on there. Um, and asking infants and tuning in.
Yes.
Those are all
Yes.
good.
And that's the challenge for family child care providers with mixed ages is that you have a lot going on. And to have a really good back and forth conversation with a child, you really need to be focused on that child. So that is obviously an obstacle and a challenge when you have an infant over here and a toddler toddling over there, and you're trying to engage this child when all this other is going on. So it can be admittedly quite challenging. But the benefits can also be great as well.
And their answer might take your plans in a whole different direction. That was a comment from a participant, which that
That
is
is
exactly
true.
right.
And that is okay, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like the question about the moon. You may end up, researching information about the moon and then go into a whole entire unit about the moon if that spurs the interest. So yeah, there are a lot of things to think about when asking these open-ended questions, but they are so powerful that the more you can interweave them in your day, even just during routine times. Why do you think it's so important to brush your teeth? What do you think would happen if you didn't brush your teeth? Same thing with hands. Why is it important to wash our hands? What would happen if we didn't wash our hands? What would happen if the water got turned off? How could we wash our hands if we had no water? Those are things that you can just tie in during routine times. And you might be surprised at what they come up with. They may say, well, we could go outside and we could wash our hands in a puddle. Or we could go outside and we could find a swimming pool and could we wash our hands in the swimming pool? So who knows what they might come up with. Um, but yeah, they can really fit in any part of the day, not just during activities. And that's the goal, right? That even meal times, getting ready for nap time, pickup time, drop off time, what was your favorite thing that we did today? Why was that your favorite? End of the day question, right? Um, Again, it can be challenging, but yet it is extremely powerful and extremely important. So, any more questions before I close this PowerPoint out? Because it'll take me just a second to get to our website. Any more questions, comments regarding the PowerPoint itself? There is a PDF handout of the slides from the PowerPoint itself. If you are a quality specialist, mentor, coach with a CCR&R, technical assistance, and you want the actual PowerPoint itself, in other words, the PowerPoint presentation, and you want that file so that you can do this training with your providers, you can email me at it's B as in boy Smith at gwizeducation.com, and I would be more than happy to send that to you. Our goal is to provide this training, obviously, for all of you that are providers, but also to support the quality specialists if they would like to do this training in their agency. We're more than happy to do that. So any questions at all about the PowerPoint before I go into the website?
Beth, I'm going to type your email into a question that someone just sent in,
Okay.
and so that everybody can have that. But I think that I think that is part of the presentation too. They should see your email. If you send it to me either way, we'll make sure that you get it. Okay.
Okay. I am going to end this slideshow and give me one second. close this out, and we're going to go to our website. So we have a mix of people on the webinar tonight who may or may not be familiar with GWiz Education and what we do. I know we have a lot of customers on here, but I also know we have trainers and we have people who are not customers. So what I just did is I went to our website, which is just simply gwizeducation.com. For those of you who are not familiar with what we do, we create a digital curriculum for family childcare. Interestingly enough, um, we've been doing this since 2012. We're approved in a lot of states and aligned fully with every state. But the funny thing is, we created this company for family childcare, and now, ironically, we have centers who want to use our curriculum designed for family childcare in their centers, which in Florida, for instance, is perfectly fine, and the state has no problem with that. But it's just ironic because up until recently, there's always been lots of options for curriculum for centers, but not for family homes. So this is just kind of funny to us. But anyway, gwizeducation.com. So what I want to show you on this website is a couple of things. First and foremost, under training and support, I'm going to go to webinar training, and this is really important. So this is what you're going to do as soon as we end the webinar if you want to complete the post assessment, which will then allow you to download the certificate of attendance. If you are in Pennsylvania and you have registered for this event in the PD registry, you must complete the post assessment and and so that I can give you credit. Okay, I will be able to see who does and who does not. So if you attend but you don't do the post assessment, I can't give you credit. If you attend and you do the post assessment, I can. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down, and right here you're going to see this webinar that we are currently doing. All right, so we have here the handout for the PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you these two things in just a second. But here it says post assessment link. We use Google Forms. So when you click this link, don't do it now because it's not going to work. It's not active yet. It will be active at the end of the webinar. You will click the post assessment link. It will open. It's a very simple quiz, like 10 questions, a lot of multiple choice about open-ended questions. At the very end of that, when you get to the very end of it and you hit submit, pay attention because there's going to be a message that pops up and says, thank you for submitting your post assessment. Here's a link to print your certificate, which you will need to block and copy that link, and then you can print out the certificate. Okay, but this does not work right now because I have not turned it on. I'm going to ask you to give me a few minutes when we're all done, and I'll turn it on, and then you can do your post assessment. If you have any problems whatsoever, you can email me, you can email Sherry, and I'm also going to show you where you can get to our customer service and email there as well. Okay, this is being recorded. So this button that now says register, once we post the recording, will say watch. So you can come back and watch and listen to this as many times as you would like. You can share it with friends that you think would benefit from it. You can share this page of our website because I'm going to show you in a second as you scroll down. There are many more recorded webinars that we have done. So, but right now what I want to show you are two of the handouts that are currently up during this presentation that you can download from the sidebar, or you're going to be able to download them from our website if you just don't want to do it from the sidebar. And the first one is the action verbs poster. So these are words that you can use when you're talking with children. You'll notice this pyramid again, which is Bloom's taxonomy. These are verbs to use in conversations with children as you're asking those questions that fall under each of these different areas. So for instance, for remembering, a word like describe or find. For applying, word like solve or choose. Creating at the top, obviously, design, create. So this is a poster you can just print to help you remember as you engage with children the kinds of verbs you want to use that fall in each of these different areas of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so that's one poster. And then the second one is an open-ended poster to help you remember some open-ended question starters. Why do you think? How did you decide to? What do you think will happen when? What makes you think? Why do you suppose? How could you? What do you like best about? Tell me about. So this is just something you can print out, you can put it up there, and then as you're planning your experiences and you're doing your experiences, it jars your memory of what an open-ended question is, and so you can use those with children as you're engaging with them during activities, okay? So these two posters are also handouts during this webinar on the sidebar, along with the PowerPoint. Um, and this is where, and I'll go over this one more time before we end the webinar about where to go to do the post-assessment and how to get the certificate of attendance, okay? But what I want to do right now is I want to scroll down on the same page and show you there are many other webinars that we do. These are all free webinars. It does not cost anything. They all have, most of them have a PowerPoint presentation, and then they all have a post-assessment certificate of attendance. So the one we just did recently was called the Why Behind Experiences. This one talks about why it's so important to understand what developmental areas you're addressing during each activity and the goals and skills behind that. So if you wanted to watch that, you would simply click watch. If you are not familiar with who we are and what we do at GWiz, this is an excellent one to watch about GWiz. It walks through all the components of what's included in the curriculum, but more importantly, our approach and how we cover all 10 developmental areas for all ages, from infants through school age, in one curriculum, including adaptations for all kinds of different developmental levels and ELL, DLL. So if you're not familiar with who we are and what we do, this is a great one to watch. Um, Lesson planning for a mixed age group is also extremely beneficial if you're family child care. And it even has a lesson planning form. We've given you a sample teaching guide there. And there's just making math meaningful. If you just scroll down, there are numerous ones that you are more than welcome to watch. And again, share with your friends and coworkers and other people that you feel would benefit from watching them. So again, I am under the training and support tab, and all I clicked on was webinar training. Okay. Before I go anywhere else and do anything else, any questions about where to find today's webinar, the post assessment, the handouts on our website, gwizeducation.com, before I do anything else?
There's one question right now, Beth. Can you get the PAPD registry hours for the recorded webinars also?
Yes, I believe so, especially the ones that are up towards the top of the list that have been done fairly recently. If it's in there as an event, even though it's in the past, I should be able to add you to the registration list. And if I can't, I know somebody I can ask that question to. So good question.
Can we watch these to get the training hours in PA in
I
Pennsylvania?
I believe so. Um, I've added people to the registration list after the event, and I've not had an issue with it as long as they did the post assessment and watched the webinar.
And then can one take the assessment other than tonight? And yes, you can. You can
Yes.
come back tomorrow. And actually, it'll be live tomorrow because I'm sure you're all very, very tired. And it'll take a few minutes to turn it on. So one person said they were driving and they wanted to know how long it will take. It shouldn't take long. So if you're driving, please don't take it till tomorrow so you can get the link.
Yeah, no, we keep that post assessment up as long as we have, even once we've okay, so like the Making Math Meaningful, we might have done that 6 months ago, but it's still up there. The recording's up there, the post assessment's up there, the handouts are up there. Think of this as our library of webinar training on this page.
And then once again, could you repeat where to get the post quiz?
Yes, I'm going to do that at the very, very end, right before we end, so that everybody knows where to go. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any questions about any webinar training before I went elsewhere on the website.
Yeah,
No questions?
no,
Okay.
that looks
And
valid.
and
Yeah.
this is mainly because we have so many things on this website that are beneficial to you, and I'm going to actually stay on this one page now that I know that this, excuse me, teaching guide is down here. I'm going to pull it up. All right, so like I said, GWiz is all about family child care, and yet we do have centers who are using our curriculum. And the reason I'm going down here and pulling up the sample teacher's guide is the open-ended questions is a big part of what we do in our lesson plans. And I just want to show you how we do it, so that maybe that can help you as you do your lesson plans. All right, so This was a unit we did called Balls, Blankets, and Boxes. It was in June before. And what you'll see in our lesson plans is for each experience, this is what we call exploring together, which is it's like a circle time, but not. It's more hands-on than that. It truly is exploring together. It's not, you as the educator are just talking and the children are all looking at you and listening. No, 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 no. We're engaging and whatnot. But you'll see over to the right, um, there are questions over here. And you'll see some that are more closed, and you'll see some like this one. How long do you think it would take to mail a package to wherever, which are more closed, right? And then how does the mail carrier know where to deliver a package? What do you see on the box? What do you think they say? We build these questions in. So in the next page, we have packing and shipping. This is not a question, but tell me about is a great way to start a sentence that opens up that conversation as well. And then banging on boxes, what technique did you find that worked best for using the box to make music? So we build those questions within the actual lesson plans, and that's what I'm kind of encouraging you to do. As you're planning your activities, if you're not using a curriculum per se like this and you build your own curriculum, I want you to take the time to for each thing you're planning to do, think of at least one question to ask. So let's say, you're going to set out the water table. It's going to be hot tomorrow. You're going to put it outside. You're going to add all kinds of funnels and strainers and dishes and whatnot. I want you to come up with some questions that you could ask as a children free play in the water table. All right. I want you to think about that and think about the answers that they're going to give. An easy way, besides knowing that they start with what, why, and how a lot of times, is to think about, will all the children answer the same way? And if they're going to all answer the same way or basically the same way, or there's a one word answer, then it's probably not open enough, right? So as you're thinking about your activities for tomorrow, right? I want you to think about an open-ended question you could ask. And so one of our this lesson, this teaching guide is actually available to anybody who wants to download it. So if you want to download it and get an idea of, the types of lessons that we plan, the type of activities that we do, here's an open-ended question: what would happen if cereal did not come in a carton? You're going to have answers all over the board for that one, right? So you'll see how we blend the open and the closed questions within the lesson plans. So what I want to do right now before we wrap up for this evening is I want to put this in your own personal wheelhouse, let's say. So I want you to think about, you probably all have some idea of at least one experience or activity you plan for tomorrow. It's Friday. Um, I want you to think about what you have planned, and I want you to share an open-ended question that you would ask during that experience. So just like I said with the water table experience, like you could just say, I'm going to put out the water table and these things, and this is the question I'm going to ask. Or we're going to do X, and this is the question I'm going to ask. So it doesn't have to be a long, detailed write out the whole activity with objectives and everything. No, just briefly, an activity you're planning to do tomorrow and an open-ended question you can now ask during that experience, because I want you to apply what you've learned tonight. It's really important to me as a trainer, but it's also important to you because you can go to all the webinars you want, but if you don't apply what you've learned, then it's not benefiting you at all. So share what you plan, something simple, and then one open-ended question you could ask during that experience. And we'll have Sherry probably
Mm.
not share all of them, but some of them.
Um, so there's one question as you're thinking about what you're going to type. Could we get copies of these example activities? And everything that Beth has shown you tonight is on our website and free, that whether you're a member or not a member, and you can download those. She has been on the web training page, webinar
Yes.
training page,
Yes.
so it's all right there.
Yeah, so if
Um,
you want the lesson plan book I was just in, you're talking about the boxes, blankets, and balls teaching guide. If that's what you're talking about, just scroll down on the webinar page to lesson planning for a mixed age group, and you'll see where it says teacher guide, and you can click on that, and it'll open up, and you can print it, you can save it, you can do whatever you want. Um, that's a really fun unit that we did, like I said, last summer. but we have right now for July. Oh gosh, Sherry, I think it's off to the beach and something about the forest. And
Yes.
then coming up in August is when the sun goes down, which is about night and nocturnal animals. And in the second half of August, it's adventures with friends. So if you want to see, and I will show you that right now while people are typing their activities and questions, if you want to see what we do. Our yearly outline is under about the curriculum, and our catalog is under here as well. And then if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of everything we do, including how we individualize, how we meet all 10 developmental areas, you go here to the user's guide. That's a very extensive document. And if you want to see how we align to your state standards, you go under about the curriculum to state standards. And we have not just how we align, but also links to your own state standards as well.
Okay, so we have some questions for tomorrow. Evidently, they're doing the sand play. What do you think is going to happen when we add water to the sand? It's a good
Excellent.
open end. Um, we'll, a provider says, we'll be releasing our butterflies. Where do you think,
Oh,
so the question is, where do you think the butterflies will go after they are released?
ooh, wonder where they
Um,
will go.
our nature theme, why do you think rocks are different colors?
That's a great question.
Yeah. We are learning about different landscapes. Tomorrow is mountain and canyons. How do you think the mountains are made? Whoa, that's a good one.
And then you get to go to Google.
Yeah. We've set up white flowers in vases with colored water. I will ask, how did the petals change colors?
Oh, great open-ended question.
Painting with water with ones and twos. Why can you see it change on cement sidewalks but not change on the scooter because it's plastic? Well, that's a really good
Ah,
question.
excellent question.
We'll be watering and weeding our garden. I will ask, what do you think will happen if we don't water the garden over the weekend? And why would that happen? That's a really good
Oh,
question.
excellent.
Beach day. What do we do at the beach? What are some creatures at the beach and how long does it take to get there?
Too
Those are
long.
good. All right. Those are good.
Excellent. Well, it seems like you really grasped the concept of open-ended questions. Um, I encourage you, like I said, as you're planning your experiences, to do just what you just did and think about the questions you're going to ask because, again, our days get busy. We get, at least my brain goes in 3 million different directions at one time. And if I don't write things down, I just completely forget. Um, on our website, the other part that I want to share you is under educational resources. We have a ton, everything that you see right now is available to anybody. You do not need to be a customer to access any of this, okay? So for instance, our booklet about the learning environment ties in nicely with open-ended question because it talks some more about the environmental rating scale. Our book on parent involvement and family engagement gives you ideas of ways you can build both of these things in your program. Under resources for providers, we have all of these things. If you're a specialist, we have things just for you in this section. And like I said, under about the curriculum, if you want to learn about GWiz, there's a ton of information here. And if you, say you really liked what you just saw in that teaching guide and you're like, this is kind of cool. I didn't even know this existed, which we hear all the time, even though we've been around since 2012. We do have a free 14-day trial. So you can sign up and have access to the units. With GWiz, we are not something that is shipped to you. We live right here on this website. So just like what I just did when I opened the sample teaching guide for boxes, blankets, and balls, that's how you would open your curriculum. You log in and everything is digital. You choose whether to print it or view it on your computer. Our family letters, for instance, are PDF files that you can email to parents so you don't have to print them out and don't have to know they're going to get lost in the diaper bag or under the seat of the car. Um, we have a ton of tools to help you connect to formal assessment and individualize, like I said. So anyway, that is not what this webinar is about, but just so you know, everything that you are seeing is available to any of you. Okay, so one more time, I'm going to go and do it exactly like what you're going to do. So you're going to go to gwizeducation.com, and to get to the post assessment, you're going to go to training and support, and then you're going to go to webinar training. And you're simply going to scroll down to right here where it says post assessment link. But if I click on that right now, it's going to say, I'm sorry, it's not accepting responses because I have to turn it on. So once we end the webinar, I will, go in, I will turn it on, and you will be able to do the post assessment. Like I said, once you get to the end of it and you hit submit, pay attention because you're going to see a big, long, address like you do up here in your search bar that has the PDF to the certificate of attendance. If you have any problems with that, you can't figure it out, it's not working or whatever, just email Sherry, who you will have her email, or you can email me, or you can go to training and support, and under that you can go to send us an email. Okay. And then you can just type in there, hey, I already did the post assessment, but I couldn't figure out how to print a certificate. Can you help me? And we will be more than happy to help you. So one more time, training and support, webinar training, and you're just going to scroll down. This is also where you can get your action verb poster and your open-ended poster, but right here is going to be the post assessment link. And again, tomorrow after we upload this, it'll say watch instead of register. Um, any questions, comments, anything I can answer before we end for the evening? There will be some very, 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 very short survey questions that pop up at the end of this. Please take just a second to answer them because they're very beneficial for me as a trainer and for us. And then, like I said, it'll give me time also to go out there. It only takes a few minutes, but I have to go into a whole different place to turn on the post assessment so that you can start answering those questions and be able to print your certificate of attendance. So again, any last minute questions, anything I can answer at all.
Yeah, one thing to note, your survey questions are not the post assessment.
No.
So just to turn that on. There's one question here, how could you ask questions to a 1-year-old?
Well, it's a little challenging to a 1-year-old to ask an open-ended question because they can't obviously respond verbally to you. So I think when you're talking about nonverbal children or a 1-year-old, the most important thing you can do is describe, right? So you're going to describe their actions, you're going to describe what happens, you're going to describe, it looks like you put a block on top of that stack. What do you think is going to happen if you push it over? I mean, or if you put a push on it, and then when they do push on it, then you can describe what happens. Obviously, they're not going to engage with you verbally at that stage because they're just developmentally not ready for that. But you can help prime them for thinking creatively by describing their actions and the cause and effect that happens as they interact with materials and even other children.
Okay, I think we have no more questions. Um, Again, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you have questions after we close out, just you can send them to customer service. You can send them to me at smayberry@gwizeducation.com or bsmith@gwizeducation.com. Um, but Beth, do you have any closing remarks or?
Nope, nope. I just want tonight when you are trying to settle down to go to bed, think about some open-ended questions that you're going to ask, and do it's you guys seem like you did a great job. I really appreciate the time you took tonight because I know it's a long day and you guys have to be tired, but I appreciate it. I hope you learned something, and my goal for you is that you'll be able to implement some of what you learned tonight tomorrow. It should be that way, and I really, really appreciate this is important. I appreciate all the interaction because that's how we all learn. We learn from each other, and there was so much interaction and so much sharing of ideas. That is what makes these webinars so much fun for me and hopefully for you too. So thank you so much for all of that interaction.
Yeah, just give us a little bit to turn that post assessment on. It'll take a while for the video or for the webinar to record and let us post it sometime tomorrow. But otherwise, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your evening, what's left.
Thank
Um,
you.
Thanks.
Good night,
Night.
everybody. Bye.